Hi, welcome to Chat with Sonlight. If you've been listening with us, you know we have done part 1 and part 2 of Ask Me Anything with Sunny and Johna. Now is the conclusion and part 3 of their session.
So let's go ahead and answer Rachel's question. This is a great question about Sonlight in general. She said they just started with Sonlight. They're doing levels E and H specifically, but when she was doing a read aloud, she came across several passages that she felt were inappropriate, so she skipped over them and moved on. She understands this happens. It's a wonderful book otherwise. So she actually has a 3-part question. We'll break this down just so it's not overwhelming for you watching. But the first one is there a heads up for parents regarding books that may have passages, subject matters, conversations that might be deemed inappropriate for some families? Johna, how does Sonlight handle that?
So in our instructor guide, you will find notes for read alouds, usually in the back section 3. Is it 3 or 4? 3. Mm-hmm. That has all the notes for the book. So if you're looking in the front part and it has the week, you may not see the notes. You need to go back to section 3. Just that's one step. And we will have comments in there, heads up. There might be a word that is used in the 20s and 30s that was totally acceptable, that has changed over time and now is not used in the same terms as in the 20s and 30s, but you're reading a book that was written in that time. So don't shy away from explaining to your children how words can be misused or changed. I won't say misused because it's not that they're misused, but you can give a different word for the same thing. I know there's words that, my grandfather used in just being out on the farm that was totally normal, but now, I go forward to when I was in high school, I was like, you said what? What are you talking about? And to him, it's the way he grew up. He had to explain it to me. And then I realized, in this situation on a farm, that's appropriate. For me to use it going into Walmart, maybe not appropriate. So, but that's just something I expanded my vocabulary, and that's your kids are learning a way to expand their vocabulary with an understanding of a cultural change, and for you to be there. And that's what those notes are there for. So that's the biggest is pre-read the notes, or just know, especially when it comes to vocabulary words, or when it says notes to mom and dad or notes to parents, that's your key, that there is something in this section that you might be heads up. We will give you heads up when there is a death of somebody that has caused a lot of trauma, that, hey, the main character dies, or, a dog dies, that this might cause your child some grief, that this is the time to be aware that it's coming. And you can say to your child as you're reading, I'm going to read you something and it's going to be sad. We're going to talk about it when we're done. And I love that Sonlight gives you those heads up, and they give us books that have these things in them, because my kids and we would have those conversations at the time, and I would just stop school. You don't try to gloss over it. Just, do you have any questions about what I just read? Let me tell you a couple things that I think I would have had questions about. If they say, no, I don't have any questions. And then have the discussions, about the dog dying and how it made them feel, or what happened, or, what historic event just happened that you read about.
Yes.
Did I derail us? I'm sorry,
No, I think that's perfect. And that's actually something at the beginning of the week. I don't do a huge amount of lesson planning personally, because the Sonlight Instructors Guides do such a good job of doing that for me. But if I see that little in the box, which is a parent note, I am going to look at that and see, what is it talking about? Even for my older child who's in high school, I want to know, because she does read a lot of the books on her own now at this age. What are we talking about? Is it death, loss? Is it suicide? Is it a sexual situation? As the kids get older, you're not going to introduce those topics in 3rd grade with a Sonlight book. But as the kids get older and they're reading things, I want to make sure that I'm aware of what's going on. It also opens the door to have those conversations that your kids may not bring to you necessarily, but these are topics they're hearing about from their friends. If they have any friends at all, they are hearing some things maybe from those friend groups. And so when you address it in a Sonlight book, it's super helpful at that time. I think I've always found it to be incredibly age appropriate to have those conversations with my child when they come up in Sonlight. Now, I will say that as a precaution, pay attention to the age range recommended for the level you're doing. If you are doing level F with kids that fall in that age range, but a 6-year-old sibling might be walking in and out of the room or listening, you're going to want to really pay attention to those types of things, because F is designed for those older, upper elementary, middle school age groups, or, any of the levels, whatever it is. So just because your child is a strong reader, do not push them ahead too soon, because you're going to be dealing with harder topics the older they get. But again, like I said, I've always found it to be relatively age appropriate. It's something that I do not ever want to have my head in the sand. I know my kids are learning things from their friends in the outside world as well, and I would rather be the one to have those hard conversations with them first. But like you mentioned, Johna, the thing about language and words that have changed over time, that's something that also for your kids, they may not understand it. They may not even know that it's something that might be considered a bad word now. So in the early years, I just read it and see if they react to it. I mean, that's kind of how I've always handled that. And then as they get a little bit older, I'm like, okay, do you know what that means? Do you understand what that means? And some people find it more comfortable to do an audiobook if it's going to have a lot of terminology that is uncomfortable for us to say. So there's a lot of options there, but remember, as the Sonlight parent, you have the right to decide what you want your kids to know, what you want to teach them. If you find a book to be too mature, you can drop it or substitute it or do whatever you want to do. So don't think that we are telling you have to do every single book, because we know that families have differing levels of what they're comfortable with. We know children have differing sensitivity levels. That child may have experienced trauma that is going to make something hard for them that it won't for another child. So your kids best. Feel free and comfortable to flex that as you need to. But I kind of do Sonlight as it's written, and charge into those hard topics with my kids, because I know they're going to hear them eventually, and I would rather do it when they're in my home than when they're on their own trying to figure life out. But let's talk a little bit about the read alouds in there, because she asked, the second part of her question was, are read aloud books chosen as a read aloud rather than readers because they're more likely to need to be edited by the parent on the fly as they read aloud, excuse me.
Well, so I think this is a two-part, or there's two parts to that question. One, I don't think that Sonlight is expecting you to edit on the fly. We're expecting you to have those conversations. By all means, we're not asking you to try to skip over words and all the things. They do pick up the books because the books are, you wouldn't make them readers because they're not the kids' reading level yet. They're an older reading level, or they are the history to include the discussions and those kind of things. They are not all going to be just their level books that you choose to read aloud. So no, I don't think that we are expecting you to edit on the fly. We are hoping that you're reading your notes in the instructor guide to give you heads up. And at that point, that is when you get to edit on the fly as a parent. You choose. Again, it's a guide that we give you as an instructor guide. We give it to you to make Sonlight work for the best that it's going to be for you. But you are the master of the school inside. So if you choose to skip over something, that's yours to decide and do. That's not ours to decide that, I laugh in my head. I hear, there is no homeschool police. There is no homeschool police. We are not going to come after you. You will find that there are some books that, I think there are some books that I even kind of was like, I'm not going to say that word, and just kind of gave it another name. Or if they called him a name, my kids laugh. I call everybody George. If I don't know your name, I have, a bear goes across the road. Oh, look, there goes George. Everything's George. And so they knew that if there was an inappropriate word, or like they all called me, I'm like, George, they knew. What did it really say? I'm like, I don't want to get into that. But, and we'd have the discussion, and I'd say, I don't feel comfortable saying that word anymore because, and I would give the lesson, and then I would substitute George. So if all of you want to say George, I love it. Tell me. Send me a comment.
So I'm going to start doing that now, using George for everything. And let's talk about the cultural literacy piece too, because she asked about getting into the high school years. Is it assumed there will be an inappropriate content in the higher level books? I saw an interesting thread on Facebook recently about A Brave New World, which many of us remember from our own high school years. Let's talk about that just briefly. Why does Sonlight include books like that, or The Great Gatsby, or some of the other ones that...
Well, honestly, let's think about that. Would you rather your little Johnny or little Susie read it under your own home and have the conversation with you, or go to college and read it because a professor expects them to have already been exposed and have the conversation with other college students who are just as baffled as they are? I think Sunlight does a great job of equipping us to have those conversations, again, one-on-one with our kids, opening up dialogue. My kids, I say all the time, my kids and I have good conversations. My kids are not perfect. My kids and I have conflict. I'm just going to tell you that. But they can pick up the phone and call me still and say, did you see? And we have those conversations. In college, I had girls that would say, how do you get a guy to want to hold your hand? I'm like, oh, that's where we're at? Great. You know, they don't. You don't want to hold their hands until they ask you to marry. No, I just...
Yeah, but mine aren't to that age yet. But yeah, I know Sonlight does, it kind of breeds readers, and so I don't have time to read all the books that my kids read on their own, and so I do want them to feel comfortable knowing if they come across something in literature that they don't agree with or that seems a little sus, as the kids would say. My daughter is going to hate me for using that word, but
oh wait, that's not even
yeah. That they can come and talk to me about it. So if you're teaching littles, you may not understand quite yet how important that is, but Johna has grown children. I have a high schooler now. I'm really seeing how glad I am that my kids feel comfortable in having hard conversations with me.
Now, and I'm trying to remember the book that one of my girls read. And I mean, it's one of those that I've seen moms, and I wish I could it's my old brain, but it's one of those that moms have said recently in the last 2 years, why would we let our kids read this? But my older girl said, oh, they talked about, and I want to say it was some inappropriate relationships, maybe some harsh, abusive type relationship. And I said, well, yeah, that happens. And in that culture, that happens. And it's something that we combat here in the States, but it still happens that, you know, someone down in the community, it's going to happen. That's why we want you to stay safe. That's why, you know, when we say this, and so it bridged that conversation into this. And I was able to explain sometimes in detail what that meant, but that allowed my kids to be aware of some real life things going on. And they did not feel sheltered, but they felt protected because they didn't have to deal with it. They read about it in a book that may or may not have happened, but
absolutely, yeah. And like we said, you're the parent, you're in charge of your homeschool, so we would never want to push you to do something you're uncomfortable with. But I think, yeah, we've seen value in having those hard conversations while our kids are still at home, because once they're out of your house, you might have some control over what they do, but not a lot anymore. So now is the time to really help them solidify, what they believe, how they feel about things, all of that while they're still children. We do have a question from Angie saying, hey, ladies, my daughter 8 struggles with the spelling in level 3 language arts. Any tips? We've tried all about spelling, but it's just too much teacher time. So I want to use the Sonlight spelling if at all possible. So this actually I see is kind of a 2-part question, both the spelling answer that we will answer for you, Angie, but then also it's very teacher intensive when you're using Sonlight. Oftentimes it's teacher intensive because we don't give kids a lot of workbooks or put them in front of the computer. So what are your thoughts, Johna?
If I was struggling with, and I was wanting to only use the spelling words that are in the Sonlight, the tips that they have at the first week are usually good tips, but making those flashcards, having them drill, that was another thing. So my third child, she had a vision, like we talked about with Sunny's, child had some vision issues, but I used to do her spelling words on flashcards, and she would have to, she literally had to stand, but she would write out the flashcards, great practice, and I didn't have to do it. To while I was like doing something else, I could hold up a flashcard while I was helping math with somebody else, and she would read the flashcard. And some of those I would have to do, I would raise the flag, excuse me, like I would have the card and I would do this, and she had to read it. It just made her focus on learning that. The other thing is that the All About Spelling is a wonderful spelling program, but it's very intensive. So you said you've tried it. My understanding, I never used it, but it is an intensive, teacher intensive program. Sunny, I don't know if you've used All About Spelling. I don't think you have
I
you?
haven't. No, and I generally speaking do not supplement a lot beyond what Sonlight tells you to, unless I see a problem. So, for example, a child with messy handwriting gets to do handwriting until they can prove to me that they write neatly, and then once they write neatly, I get rid of handwriting. I actually did use Spelling UC, so that's a different spelling approach. Briefly, I think I used it 1 or 2 years with my daughter, and that they go through and they color different letter chunks throughout the week, and then you do it kind of like a dictation at the end of the week. And so that was something that, with the exception of grading the colored chunks that she was doing during the week, I didn't find it super parent intensive like All About Spelling is. But if you're wanting to really just stick to the Sonlight language arts spelling, what I would recommend with that is maybe vary the writing surface too. I know my kids both had a lot of success with dry erase boards. So they might copy the list on paper on Monday, and then on Tuesday, they're writing it on the dry erase board. We both had one hanging on the wall, as well as a smaller one that you can put in your lap. I've heard that your brain connects what you're doing better if you write like you would on a board for whatever reason. So you might try that. And the way Sonlight does it is you write them big one day, small one day, maybe have her write them on index cards. I think back to, I think it's Language Arts 1 with the I Can Read It books in there and the word lists. Maybe convert it into like a word list and have her repeat those words. The next week, what I do is if the child missed it when we took the test on Friday, I wrote it on the next week's instructor's guide with that spelling list, and we just kept doing it until they could spell that word. So that might be an option, trying to write it in print and cursive, whatever you can do to really solidify that brain hand connection. Now, I have heard of some students that they learn how to spell the words on the spelling test, but then the rest of their spelling is atrocious because they can remember the spelling list, but then when they go to write, the rules of spelling have kind of slipped their grasp. So yeah, do you have any ideas with that, Johna?
Well, I was going to say that kiddo number 3 that I told you about with the cards, that she could take a spelling test and make 100. I mean, she has a great brain for remembering that, but 2 days later could not spell any of those words on the spelling test. So we pulled her back and did spell UC with her for a level or so, which I loved as a parent because they say set a timer. You set a timer and you do for a certain amount of time. She did not have trouble at the time doing all of the work because she was a little bit older than the level that we stuck her into. But let me tell you, it changed her spelling in a year, just being able to recognize it, that chunking. It helped her brain remember those chunks because she had learned, OU, not UO, and, those kind of combinations that she was practicing in her dictation and stuff. And that worked great for them. So
Yeah.
there's someone at the door.
Yeah, I was just saying, sorry, my dog's getting a little excited. But yeah, that's true. So Angie, if it's an issue of like the rules and remembering like OU or I before E, that type of stuff, yeah, spelling UC might be helpful. And I do think it is less parent intensive in that they work through the workbook and they're learning to spell in a paragraph as opposed to a word list. But if it's just the word list itself in the Sonlight IG, I would work on writing it on different surfaces, maybe doing like we do in the preschool program where there's like sandpaper letters that they trace and stuff. It just gives it a different texture that might help solidify that. We are running low on time, but I just saw a question come in. So I do want to hit this one too that says, what about typing the spelling words for kids who have trouble with physically writing the words, or just for a change of pace on one of the days?
I think that's great. Sunny had talked about the dry erase board. That was a game changer for my kids. I have done spelling. We didn't do our spelling words on the driveway. I would have loved to have had a driveway that I could have written on. We had gravel when my kids were little, so it's hard to write on the driveway, but take chalk out and let them write it on the driveway. Have them be creative. Sand, rice, and a cookie sheet even. If they can do that, that would be a great way to practice your words, especially when they're little. Emily, I don't know how old your kids are. Angie's, hers is 3rd grade. Having that tray is still a fun way to write your words. So, be creative. If they can spell it, I wouldn't worry about the writing as much. I mean, I think putting that hand and writing it does have a connection in your brain, and that is a key part of it. But if for some reason your kid can write it in their fingers or whatever, or get them to write it in the air. And see how that goes for them. I mean, that's less stress on you and them if they are writing it. We used to crack up. Mine would write it and they're like, oops. And they'd erase and do it again. If you haven't figured out, my kids they're about as animated as they can come. So, yes.
Well, and I just thought of something else when you said that I had forgotten about. For a long time, we had the alphabet magnets on our refrigerator too. And so that might be a fun way that doesn't feel like school, but have the kids write a story or a sentence or a message to you on the fridge with those letter magnets, because of that, they very quickly learn, like, yeah, even if things are misspelled, they start to learn those rules of spelling. And again, it's that you mentioned it with the writing. There's just something about connecting your brain and your hand in a way that helps with that versus just looking at a word. So yeah, hopefully one of those will work. We have now talked for an hour, Johna. Like I said, I can talk all day about anything. I know when we get
keep
together,
going.
we definitely can. So if you're tuned in and watching, thank you so much for being part of this. And if there's anything else that you want to ever hear Johna and I talk about, or any of the other Sonlight mentors or advisors talk about, we've got a whole team of us who have used Sonlight for years that love to share how amazing our Sonlight journeys have been and all the things we've learned along the way. We would love to talk about whatever you want to hear about. So definitely send us those questions, get involved in the community if you're not already, because we are looking at that to determine what we're going to talk about next, which, speaking of next week, is Homeschool Helps and Hacks. So if you have not joined us for one of those, I want to invite you now to that. We do Homeschool Helps and Hacks the 3rd Thursday of every month during the school year. And we just provide different tips and tricks about various topics. The one coming up next week on the 21st is going to be all about flexible organization solutions. So if you feel like you are too messy and disorganized, or you can't stay on track with your schedule, or you're just not that uptight type A personality and it is hard to stay on track, we've got all sorts of options for you in that event. So join us for that next Thursday at 1:00 Mountain Time. We will be streaming that again in the Sonlight Connections app live. If you tuned in kind of late today or missed out on some of this, we will have a replay available as well. So you can always add questions later and we will respond to those as we see them. So Johna, thank you so much for being here with me today. And for those of you who tuned in, thanks for giving us questions so that we could talk without an outline today.
Send more questions. I would love to do this again.
Yeah, this was so much fun. And yeah, we're here for you. So tell us what you want to hear.
Thank you for joining us today. Do you have an idea for a podcast topic, or do you want to chat with Sonlight on an upcoming episode? Email us at connections@sonlight.com.